All right. Well, welcome back to another edition of Inside BBI with John and Eric. I'm John McDevitt, of course, and with me, as always, senior editor of Big Blue Interactive, Mr. Eric Kennedy. Eric, it's been a busy couple of days for us. We had Colin Lindsay on the weekend. Then we had Leonard Marshall yesterday, and
Yeah.
we're moving right into to another special guest today.
Yes, we are. I'm looking forward to this one too.
So joining us is Mr. Paul Dottino, who's been covering the Giants since 1983. You can follow him on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at Giants WFAN. It's also Giants.com or New York Giants on SI.com, where you could do the Big Blue breakdown. And Paul, first off, thank you so much for joining us and talking a little Giants football with us tonight.
Great to be with you guys. I tell people I could talk Giants football 25-8, which of course doesn't exist on this earth, but I wish it did.
Well, and let's just jump real quick on the last thing I mentioned. You have your own podcast, basically a live show. Why don't you explain to folks? It's a Big Blue breakdown and kind of the unique piece about it for tomorrow night.
Yeah, tomorrow night, that's Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time on the Big Blue Breakdown Live. What we're going to do, we're going to go for at least an hour. And the thing that's going to make this podcast unique is that instead of just an interaction through chat, we've actually set it up where it's kind of like a Zoom link, where if people want to call in, rather than call in on the phone, which we don't have the ability to do, they'll be able to click on the link. And like we're talking through Zoom right now, we're doing a video phone call.
Right.
We can have video phone calls with the fans so they can actually participate and be part of the show. If they don't want to have their camera turned on, let's say, I don't know, let's say the dog is making a mess of the pillows on the sofa behind them, they can always shut off the camera and they can just go with the audio. So I'm going to be able to truly have a talk show through this video platform, so they don't just have to be limited to typing in a chat. I'm hoping the fans will like that. I'm a talkative guy. I'm an Italian. I'm all about relating to people and discussing things. So I'm hoping the fans are going to love it. We're going to be doing it every single Wednesday night. We started at 8 o'clock about 5 weeks ago, every Wednesday. Now we're going to move it to 7:30 as we now get to the regular season and the opener against the Vikings.
Nice. So I'll include all that information in the description. For this. We were talking beforehand, and you're open to, folks are going to call in. They might agree with you. They might disagree with you. You've seen a lot of like how the fans kind of react to different things. Is business better when the team is losing or when the team is winning? I feel like sometimes people just love to have the losing thing so they can tell how the team should be being run.
Well, I think ultimately, when you have a passionate fan base, and obviously the New York Giants with their history and their tradition and the way it's been handed down by generations, you're going to have either extremely hot, right? Because people are angry as they can possibly be over what's going on with the team, or they're going to be extremely hot on the other side. Now, I know the flip of hot is cold, but it doesn't work that way as a fan. Fans are always hot. They're either hot, angry, or they're hot with excitement.
Right.
They're one or the other. Like I said, I'm Italian. I'm always hot. I can't help it. I'm intense and I'm energized. But so that's what you get. And the truth of the matter is, I think in the National Football League, when your team is kind of hovering in the middle, when you're a 500 team, for example, the late 60s, over when Tarkenton was here in the late 60s, right? And they went 7-7 one year. They went 6-8 one year. When you're doing that, they went 8-6 in 1972. When you do that, fans are a little bit like they're less passionate because they're not sure how to feel.
Right.
So you either have to be winning and they're hot with excitement, or you're losing and they're hot with anger. I don't know that that's better for anybody's business, but it certainly ruffles the bushes.
Right. In some ways, it's kind of, and this is going to be kind of funny in a way to say this, it's kind of the old wrestling adage. If you were a heel, you wanted to be booed, and if they didn't boo you, then that meant they didn't care. And if you're the good guy, they're just cheering no matter what. If you get silence, that's the middle of the road that you're talking about. That's kind of like, I don't know what to do.
The worst
you
is
may not get this, but you don't want to be Johnny Robs.
Oh, nice. Well done. Well done. We're going deep into that. So go ahead, Eric. You were going to
I
throw
was just saying
something.
the worst is indifference. When people
Right.
don't care, that you're in trouble. That
Right.
when the stands are empty and people tune the Giants out, that's when you're in trouble. So
Yeah, you're Eric. You're
you
1,000%
you
correct.
want them past it. And I've noticed on the site, we actually get more traffic when the Giants lose, believe it or not, because the people want to vent. It's
Yeah.
therapeutic for them, and I'm sure Paul probably sees this and his colleagues on their call-in shows that they probably get an uptick sometimes after a bad loss because people need to relate their pain, if you will. So we'd rather have them win. We all want them to win,
Oh,
but
for
it's
sure.
interesting that I think people need a community too to sort of share their suffering as well too.
So, Paul, we were talking, and I want you, because you said it best. Kind of your role. You're basically a kind of a multi-hat kind of guy. You're doing things with through WFAN, but you work with the Giants directly, but you do other stuff too. So, kind of tell people and describe it the way you were telling us beforehand.
Well, I'm a hybrid, and there's no question about that because there, on one hand, when I'm doing the Giants game day broadcast, whether it's the play-by-play like I did during the preseason game against Houston, or I'm doing the pregame, postgame for the FAN or MSG, that's all under the Giants broadcast department. They blew kickoff live during the week. I'm under the Giants broadcast department. But then when I'm doing New York on under the SI banner, and that's a different organization. So I'm a hybrid. For years, Eric will remember this. For 9 years, I worked with ESPN 1050 Radio in New York before I joined the Giants broadcast team and came back to WFAN. For 9 years, I was ESPN New York, and so I've been on both sides of the fence and straddled both sides of the fence for most of my career. Where as a hybrid, I truly understand the full picture in terms of, okay, I see what the corporate mentality is, but I also see what the blue collar I don't know, boilerplate mentality is, if
Right.
that's the proper term to use.
Right.
I get it. And I also have an understanding, because I was in the newspaper business for well over 30 years as well. I also understand the angle of how that business works. And I think the best thing I could say, John, is because that I've had multiple jobs, TV, radio, internet, newspaper, covering this team for 42 years, not only have I seen how the media has evolved and how the fan base has evolved, but I also understand the business of how it has evolved,
Right.
and the procedures for how the job is done, and how perceptions and how narratives change over the years. And unfortunately, we're not in a great time right now.
Right.
Right. We were talking about this separate before we've had you on, and so I guess this is a great point that I'm going to ask it at this moment because of some of what you just talked about. This past year was kind of an interesting off season because the Giants did Hard Knocks, and there's a lot of fan talk about different things, and I can touch on some of those individually afterwards. But your thoughts, how different did that make things for the Giants this offseason to have those cameras, to be around, and did that change any of the day-to-day sort of the way people were in the show, how you see them day-to-day without the cameras?
No, not at all. To be honest, they were very unobtrusive. They did not cause any problems that I could honestly tell you. In fact, the most obvious times that they were around is when there was a media availability, and you would see cameras around anyway for a media avail. So it just meant that there were more cameras. That's all it meant. It was like the room was more crowded because all of the other stuff, and you guys understood this by watching the program. They had mini cams planted all over the building,
Right.
whether it was in hallways or in Joe Shane's office, or in the scouting department's office, wherever the case may be. So they were not manned cameras. Those were all mini cams that were set up. So you didn't have people like literally like ants crawling over a cake at a picnic. That's not what was going on. So it really was not very intrusive at all. I think the only thing that I said to people on Big Blue Kickoff was that I thought it was kind of fun. Every fan out there thinks that they stress out, they lose sleep, and they stress over transactions that the team may or may not make.
Right.
Well, what did we see in Joe Shane's office the day that they were trying to make the trade for Brian Burns? We saw him sweating up a storm.
Right.
He was
Right.
talking about how stress was way off the top. His watch had recorded stress that was absolutely,
That's right.
breaking the bank, right? And he's like, "Whoa, what's going on here? We haven't gotten a call. It's hours and hours. Free agents are coming off the board. We got to know what's going." And I've never seen Joe like that. And I'm in the building, as you guys know, an infinite amount of times during the week, and to see Joe like that in his office, I don't know. For me, I'd never seen him like that, stressed out. But he was stressed out trying to, figure out when is that call going to come from Carolina so we can lock this trade down. And I just said to the fans, I'm hoping that you guys out there now see that the general manager is a human being too. And as
Right.
much as you think you stress over transactions, do you now see what he goes through?
You know,
I'm sorry.
go ahead, Eric, please.
I was going to say, I had someone from within the Giants organization contact me, I think after the second episode, and I won't name names here, but he said to me, he said, I can't believe fan reaction to this. And he said, people see what they want to see. In other words, you could watch, there was almost there was two movies going on, and one audience saw one version of it and one audience saw a different version. Did you have that reaction with interacting with fans afterwards? Were you surprised by some of the reaction to what was shown on the screen and say, but that's not what you should have taken away from that? Did that surprise you at all?
The only angle that surprised me on that, Eric, was there was much too much made out of the Drake May trade scenario.
Okay.
People who are very anti-Daniel Jones thought that the Giants were going to go all in and make a deal for Drake May. Well, they didn't go all in and make a trade for Drake May. They did their due diligence. Everybody and their mother who wanted to check in with the Pats was going to check in, because you know what? If they're going to trade the pick, and we didn't at least check in and find out what the price was, then we didn't do our job.
Right.
So the Giants obviously had identified, from every context that we could figure out, that, hey, yeah, Drake May might be somebody we'd be interested in. We got to do our diligence. Let's just check in and see what they're talking about. Because if they're gonna sell this thing short and make it a cheap deal, we should probably get involved in that. Sure, absolutely.
But you didn't see the offer. You didn't think the offer, the fact that Shane was talking at some point about, he was talking about next year's number one. So you're talking about, we don't know the specifics of the offer, but it seems to strongly suggest, I think they actually said it, that Shane was offering, this year's number one, next year's number one. The question is, you have a New England sports reporter saying the Giants also offered a number two and number three. Other reporters are saying they didn't. But you don't think that was an indication that there was more than just a cursory interest there? That they're, again, I don't think they were going to give up the moon, but it seemed like there was more than just due diligence.
I think that clearly there was interest. There's no doubt there was interest, but to what degree?
Right.
And it comes down to, people want to argue over what degree. What does it matter? They did not give away the farm to go make the deal.
Right.
And we all know, if a team really wants to go get a guy, they'll pull a Mike Ditka and trade an entire draft to go get Ricky Williams. Right?
Yeah.
Guys, if they were that desperate to get rid of Daniel Jones, and they were that desperate to go get a quarterback, then no price was too high.
Right.
Fellas, let's use common sense here.
So I have an opposite side of that equation. Is you'll have I'm curious if you've heard this, and I'm sure you have. There's a portion of the fan base that says the Giants would not have made that move up because John Mara's not going to let them do that. Their perception, no matter what happens, is that he decides everything. And I think that's, to me, I watched Hard Knocks and I saw a guy who
No.
was letting Shane do his job. He
Correct.
just talked. But do you get frustrated when you hear people say things like, because you see the inside of the building, but you hear people make statements as if they are part of inside the building?
Well, and that's the problem, because what you have, a lot of the fan base who comes up with erroneous assumptions or erroneous theories. Well, you got to remember, where are they getting their information to formulate those opinions? They're getting them from what they're reading, probably on Twitter or
Right.
in a blog, or because some guy heard from some janitor who wanted to speculate and decided to put it out on a radio. I mean, look, I will tell you guys this, and I can't give it who it is up, but I
Sure.
talked to somebody from the Patriots the week of the draft, and I said, "You guys are not trading that third pick, are you?" And he laughed and he said, "We have put such a price tag on that third pick. We want Drake
Right.
May. We're drafting Drake May, and we have purposely put an outrageous price tag on that pick because we don't want to make the trade."
Right.
And I said, "Okay, that's all I needed to know."
And that came across in Hard Knocks, I think, too. I think for people who actually, again, don't come into it with preconceived notions, I think there definitely was interest on the part of the Giants, but I think it became clear that the Patriots' asking price was too high. I think anyone who watches, they come away with it. So I think what you just said supports what we saw.
I think the point to be made, though, the price was outrageously too high on purpose. But
Correct.
if the Giants were all in on Drake May or Jaden Daniels and all out on Daniel Jones, they would have met the price.
Right.
They weren't going to come anywhere near that price, which tells you that it was casual to moderate interest. It wasn't all in interest.
Was it, since we're on Hard Knocks, is it safe to assume, Eric and I talked about this, what seemed to be the most uncomfortable moment in that piece during free agency is Shane talking to Barkley or Barkley's agent, and basically it seemed like two sides that were just doing what they're supposed to do. We're supposed to talk to each other, but there is no way this is happening.
It seemed like a breakup. It seemed like a mutual breakup.
It seemed like a bad relationship that was coming to an end. And is that kind of the feeling too? Like in the building, you kind of, some people wanted Barkley, but you knew that the price was going to be just not going to be there.
Well, I think the problem here, guys, there's a perception that Barkley put out there for probably a year and a half. I want to be a lifetime Giant. I want to be part of turning this around to be a winner. I want to be known as one of the greats in franchise history. When a guy says all of that, if you take it at face value, then you have a belief that when push comes to shove and you start talking about numbers and you think you're being reasonable,
they'll get the deal done.
You think the deal's going to get done because the guy's heart is in making the deal.
Yeah.
And if you want to use hometown discount as a term, well then fine. So the perception that Barkley gave out for a year and a half was that there would be a hometown discount because it was ultra important for him to be a Giant. As it turned out, it was clearly not ultra important to him. He, in my opinion, and I think Hard Knocks proved this, he was going to the highest bidder no matter who it was.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, agreed.
I agree. Yeah,
agreed.
So I think that's pretty clear.
And for that, I was very happy because I had said to people all along, "Oh, the Giants are going to get this done. Barkley's going to be back," because I believed him at face value. I knew where I had an idea logically of where Joe was willing to go.
Right.
I knew they were going to make him one of the top highest 5 paid running backs in the league. And I'm thinking, well, based on what Barkley said, they're going to be able to make this thing work. There's no reason why this would not work. Of course he's going to be here.
Right.
And then it became apparent that Barkley's words were hollow and he was just going to the highest bidder. Once that happened, you knew he was gone.
And I think you could hear that in Shane's voice. I think when one thing I would say about Hard Knocks, and I know why they did it, Barkley was their hook. They had to have an arc. They wanted to tell a story, and so I think they spent. I think some fans probably appreciate this. I think they spent way too much on Barkley, but I understand why they did. He's the face of the franchise. They were saying goodbye. It was dramatic. They did very little on Xavier McKinney. I would like to have heard that, but I agree with you, Paul. I think what came out of that was that it the player usually goes where the money is, and Barkley went where the money was. The other things he said, but it didn't matter as much as he said it was going to.
You know what's an interesting point, guys, and I think this seemed to go unnoticed out in the fan base and certainly in the media. Remember when I believe there was the conversation where there seemed to be some dispute or debate between the Giants and Barkley as to, did the Giants tell Barkley, go out, fish for an offer,
right,
and then let us know what the best offer was you got and see if we can have the right to match. There seemed to be a debate about that, right?
Right.
Well, there wasn't any debate if you watched Hard Knocks, because how did the final call take place? It was on the series. Mm-hmm. The final call between Shane and Barkley took place when Joe made the call.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay. Right. Barkley and his agent did not call the Giants
right
for a right to match. Joe finally picked up the phone and said, look, I better check in on this.
Yeah, I didn't catch that. So that's an excellent point that you just made. That's an excellent point.
Well, and you saw kind of where it was going when he was talking to the agent. I believe, it's a couple of days prior or whatever. It's kind of hard to tell in the timeline when they're filming it. And he said, if you guys are going to go out, if you're going to go out, and he goes, is 12 going to do it? And he's like, well, no. And you could hear, and he's like, so it more than 12, like, you're not really. And then he tells John Mara, he's like, I don't even know if they'll agree to the 12. Like it's so
Joe knew then that Barkley was going to the highest bidder. And this was so, and again, Joe had to make that final call. If you remember watching the show, why didn't anybody pick up on that? I don't know.
I didn't pick up on it either. And the other thing too is, this didn't happen in a vacuum, and it was alluded to in the show, but a lot of people that don't follow the Giants don't realize this or follow it closely. Shane said this took 10 years off his life the previous year in the previous offseason. So this had been building and building and building for a while. This was just the culmination of almost 2 years frustration of what was going on in the negotiations here too. So I just think it just felt like a breakup at that point.
No question. Yeah. No question.
So I want to backtrack slightly, because Eric's bringing up that point. So Shane is literally talking about the off season following 22, essentially. So let's go back. You've been covering the Giants for a very long time. So one of the things that you've actually kind of been really dealing with, kind of more new than what you had previously, is for the last X number of years, we've kind of churned through coaches, 2 years, boom, 2 years, boom, which has not been in the past. Perkins was there he was not long enough, and he would have been longer if he didn't take the Alabama job. He goes, Parcells takes over. He's there for quite a while. We move on. Hanley was quick, but then you had Reeves for a while until that kind of failed. Fossil was there for a while. Then we had Coughlin. That was for a while. Now we've kind of churned coaches. So you bring in a new general manager, you bring in Daboll. Did the Giants' success in many ways catch them almost off guard? Like, they knew they were going to be redoing some things, and the cap was really handicapped that first year. And so they and then they made the playoffs. Did that kind of almost force their hand a little bit on, like, geez, we were going to make much bigger changes, but you kind of can't do that. You made the playoffs. You can't just throw it all away.
No, I don't think so, John. I think that, look, yes, did they exceed expectations? Look, again, I don't know how many people, remember how much fun that season was, because they weren't expected to do anything. I quite frankly think it was one of the most enjoyable seasons to cover, because it really came out of nowhere. And those seasons, when they're not expected to, but they do, those like, wow, hey, that was really cool,
Yeah.
Those are even more enjoyable sometimes than the ones that where you expect that the team is going to do really well. I think that Shane and Dable have always stayed the course about their plan to get this team on the right long-term track all along. I don't think they ever vary. I think it's interesting to note that this year, and I just did my diagnosis on the 53 on Monday because I never do it on the first 53 or the initial
Right.
53. I know there are going to be changes.
Right.
So what I came up with was that 18 players of the 53 men on the roster this morning are first-time Giants. Okay,
How
that's
many?
34%.
18.
18.
Okay.
That's 34% of the roster has been turned over. Okay, since last year, and 12 of the 17 guys on the practice squad are also brand new to the organization. Think about that for a minute.
Right. Right.
That shows you the kind of turnover that they have undergone here in making this happen. You got Lawrence, Jones, and Slayton, who are all 6-year pros as the 3 longest tenured Giants in the locker room right now. They've got a plan they plan on being here for several years, and they plan on making the Giants competitive for several years. And I don't think any week or any month or any one season is altering that plan.
Right. I just have one follow-up question on Hard Knocks too that caught my eye, and I don't know if this will be interest to other people, but I used to work for a government organization for 25 years that we had a big PR department, and we would do pre-briefs. And I thought one of the most interesting parts of Hard Knocks was the communications department sitting down with General Manager Shane before he did a press briefing and just basically going over what questions might come up and how to answer them. One of the ridiculous takes that I saw was Florio from Pro Football Talk heavily criticizing the Giants and Shane for going through that process, which I thought was absurd. I think all large organizations have PR departments for a reason and prepare senior level people for a reason, because they don't want them to be surprised by questions in a press conference. So my question is 2 parts, because I'm interested in that part of how the Giants work. Does that kind of pre-brief, I would assume, happen before every major press conference? Not the daily ones with the coach, but I'm assuming anytime the general manager or the owner comes out to speak, I would assume you have your communications department will sit down with them. And the other thing, did you think that was a ridiculous take by Florio too? Because I thought that was unfair and uncalled for. They basically said that, you know, the Giants are deceiving their fan base and the press by doing that.
Well, John, or Eric, here's what I'll say to that. I'm not upstairs in the offices, you know, before a press conference.
Okay.
So I have no firsthand knowledge of what's discussed or not discussed before somebody comes out and has a media briefing.
Okay.
So it would be unfair of me to tell you that I know or don't know, or that I know, because I don't.
Okay.
Okay. And that's one thing I hope some of the fans out there appreciate. I'm very transparent. As much as my emotion is right here on my sleeve, at the same time, I'll tell you if I don't know something. I've been doing this for 42 years. I'm not afraid to tell you that I don't know the answer to something.
Right.
I'm not going to try to BS my way through and bluff my way through like a lot of other media people will. I'll tell you flat out, I don't know. Here's what I'll say to that Florio comment, though. You're right. It seems to me that any corporation, before somebody is going to go out and speak publicly, it would seem just obvious that you would want someone to say, hey, just so you know, this is what's out there, or this is what's being said, and you need to at least be aware of it. I would think that any organization's staff that did not do that would not have a reason to have that staff around.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. I just thought it was an odd take, especially for someone who's in the media, to have that take. And I don't know if you saw his comments, but they were pretty harsh. And when he made them, I thought, does he not know how this works? It just took me aback, you know.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that takes me aback in the media these days.
Yeah, okay.
That is true. Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things that people bring up, since we're talking about kind of what they think sometimes is orchestrated or whatever. One of the things that people bring up is like, if John Mara has an opinion, like even if he's not coming out and saying everything is excused or whatever, but when he said we've done everything possible to screw up Daniel Jones, that was taken as he's giving an excuse that he just loves Daniel Jones and we're just going to keep throwing him out there and bring it. And I always thought, man, first off, if I was running the team, I would look at it too going, you know what? We've done everything possible to make this not work. That's not a ringing endorsement for the guy playing. It's more like we're taking responsibility for the fact that we haven't exactly done a good job of putting other people around him.
You know what, John? The difference between the Giants and many of the other organizations in the NFL is that this is the family business.
Right.
I know for the Tisch part of the 50%, it's not the primary family business, but for the Mara family, this is the family business. And failure is something that they take very personally.
Right.
I will tell you something. For all the years that I've known every single member of the Mara family, they hurt like hell every time this team loses. And every time this team is in a rut or a slump or something bad happens, they take this to heart. This is their blood. I mean, shouldn't they feel that way?
Right. Right. Yeah, it's a weird take for people to have, but so let's move a little bit if we can. I know I went back to 22 and the offseason there. Last year had to catch not only the organization itself, but you guys covering it. That everything was pointing to this is a team ascending, getting better, and then that first game, the wheels kind of came off, and it just seemed like from there, it was a hole they just couldn't dig out of. Injuries piled up. Well, what your sense of being around it? Like, how surprised were they that things kind of went that direction after the year before?
Well, flabbergasted because everything that could go wrong did. It was like Niagara Falls just came over the hill and drowned the guy in the barrel. I mean, that's from the time that Andrew Thomas got hurt.
Right.
Okay. And remember, by the way, so they open the season and they drive right down the field.
Yeah.
And then 3 consecutive bad plays.
Bad plays.
Yeah. Zap them. And then Andrew Thomas pulls the hamstring on the field goal, the blocked field goal. And then from there, every single thing that could go wrong just helped the slinky go down the stairs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've tried to tell people they won 6 games with all of this disaster in their faces, going through 3 quarterbacks, and they still won 6 games. There's a part of me that believes Brian Dable did a phenomenal job last year just to win 6.
Right.
Yeah.
But you understand that,
sure.
that people don't want analysis. They just want gut check, knee-jerk reaction. Right. And 6-11 is not going to get it done.
Yeah, and part of it is they feel, and we talked about this a little bit before we came on. The fan base feels beaten down. They were a bit of
from the last 10 years or so, honestly, Eric.
Right.
And that's the problem. The residue has built up.
And we are a bit of a spoiled fan base, at least the older guys like us are, because they have won 4 Super Bowls. They've been to 5. But there are people like my son, who's 18, turned 19. I should know my son's age. And my daughter, who's 18. They haven't seen the Giants win. So the younger fans haven't seen it. And I think so 2022 is such a surprise. And it's, we have a coach, we have a general manager, things are picking up. And I just think 2023, pardon my French, was a kick to the nuts. And it's like, I thought we were past this. So I think there's frustration that's built up over the years, and it's compounded by the way the media is today and the way social media is, and that's fueled itself as well too.
Well, I think there are 2 things to answer to that, Eric. Number one, I just gave you the turnover of the roster.
Yeah.
Right. So this front office does not feel that last year was just a matter of being snake bitten. They also believe that besides being snake bitten, the team still had to move forward and get better. And that's why they've overturned 34% of the 53 and overturned virtually the entire practice squad.
Right.
That's why they did that.
And it's a very young team too.
They see that they're one of the 5 youngest teams by average age in the NFL.
Yeah.
Okay. So they get that. So they made the moves that tell you they're not satisfied with chalking up last year to bad luck. They're like, no, there was bad luck, but we also need to get better. So that's the first answer. My second answer to you is this. What we have from a lot of the frustrated fan base today is they just want to yell, and scream holy high hell and complain. And I tell them, hey, if that's going to make you feel better, then go to the bathroom, scream at the mirror, and the mirror will tell you exactly what you want to hear. Okay? And what I try to tell them, here's what the media should be. Okay? What I think the media should be, because I grew up and started in this business back in the 80s when the media's job was kind of like being a doctor. Okay? If the team didn't do well, the media's job was to explain to the fan base, what is it that's going wrong here? Right. Why is this going wrong? What are some of the things that maybe you don't know or haven't considered as to why they've gone wrong?
Right.
And what are the possible solutions to the problem? That's what I've always believed that my job is as a beat guy, because that used to be the job of the beat guy years ago. Now it seems the job of the beat guy is to kick the dead horse in the nuts as hard as you can. That's what the fans want to hear.
Yeah.
That's what they want to see. That's what they want to hear. They want to yell at the mirror, and they want the mirror to yell back. So today, most of the media just wants to do that. Yeah. I don't see any purpose in that. I never changed my philosophy. My philosophy, try to explain what's going on, see if we can figure out, okay, where the problems are and what the possible solutions are. Some people call that being a homer. I call it being a professional and an analyst. Right. That's what I call it.
Well, there definitely is a time when the media smells blood in the water. So if they know there's a piling on period when a coaching staff or a general manager is in trouble.
No question.
And they'll just, it's like a feeding frenzy at that point. So
no question.
Just one thing before we move on, because you mentioned earlier that you'd done a 53-man roster breakdown. There are 3 guys that I think are sort of flying under the radar right now for different reasons. One, the first I'm going to bring up, I don't think is going to have a big impact on the team this year, but the only time I saw him mentioned this offseason was by you and John Schmelk during OTAs. I was hanging on every word that you guys would say during OTAs because the media doesn't have access to all of them. But Bryce Ford Wheaton's name kept coming up in the OTAs, and we didn't hear
big fan.
Yeah, and we didn't hear a lot of him in summer, and we didn't see a lot of him in the preseason making plays. But there must be something there because they let a lot of other guys go and kept him. And you see him in practice. Is there something that you know about him that why you kept him?
He worked very diligently throughout the offseason to come back from his torn ACL. Mm-hmm. Worked incredibly hard during the offseason to come back. He, in my educated opinion, was going to make the 53-man roster last year.
Right.
They were sold on his ability to play receiver, and they were sold on his ability to play special teams. He was going to make the 53. I could say that with a very strong conviction. I won't say 100% because I won't speak for the GM or the coach, but my educated opinion is that he was going to make the 53. He got hurt. They were devastated about it. Well, busted his butt, has done everything they could want. He is a really good kid. He is very eager. He's very willing to learn. He's got size. He's got length. He's got speed. And most importantly, when he came back into camp, he showed that he could still be a factor on special teams.
Right.
And remember, when he came out of West Virginia, there was something about the case of the dropsies with him. Mm-hmm. That was one of the reasons he didn't get drafted. He showed that he was fixing that.
Right.
He was catching the ball really, really well during the spring. And then as we got into training camp, he continued to catch the ball well. Then he got dinged up again.
Okay.
I had said at the beginning of the summer that I pick a dark horse every year of the undrafted guys. And I said, look, I'm going to cheat. For me, it's Bryce Ford Wheaton this year. And if you won't give me him, I'm going to, because he was already here for a year, then I'm going to take Dante Miller. As it turned out, one guy made the 53, the other guy made the practice squad.
Yeah.
Bryce Ford Wheaton, to me, he beat out Miles Boykin because Boykin's a sensational special teams player, but I think that Bryce Ford Wheaton offers more as a receiver than Boykin does. So that's why he beat out Boykin.
Okay.
The other guy he beat out, obviously, Allen Robinson. Robinson, I thought, in my opinion, he was on my 53. I would have kept Allen Robinson because I thought Olszewski might have to start the season on injured reserve because he had a bad groin.
Right.
This is why I know, Eric, you say you listened to the Big Blue Kickoff.
Right.
If you remember, when John and I got down to the final day and we were trying to discuss the 53, I came right out and I said it, and John agreed with me. There's 3 or 4 players here who have injuries who haven't played the last 2 weeks of the preseason.
Yeah.
And we don't really know how they figure into this roster because that impacts how many you can keep and who you're going to keep.
Right.
So that's the key. Okay. Instead, you got newspaper guys who are writing projected 53s for the last 3 months. Whatever.
Right.
Well,
I mean, just why don't you just come out and say what the smartest people in the world, think about this, fellas. The smartest people in the world know what they don't know.
Right.
Yes.
Think about that.
Yeah. Now, another guy I want to bring up too is the comments from the coaches seem to be so positive, but it's almost like they're hiding him. I'm not trying to conspiracy theory here, but Theo Johnson is so big when you see him in person, and for his size, he's so fast. And I think a lot of us were looking forward to see him be more of a factor in the passing game in the preseason. He was out there. Right? They had him working on his blocking, and there was good and bad with that, and mostly good. What are your thoughts on Theo? Because he seems to be flying under the radar right now.
Darius Slayton said it best. He said Theo Johnson may have the most upside of any player in that locker room today. And I think I can echo that. He's got tremendous upside. He had a terrific training camp. From the moment he got here in rookie camp, you could see that he was going to be a difference maker.
Okay.
Now, he's also, remember, he missed the first few days of camp, right? He was a little bit behind. They want to be very careful with him. They don't want to rush him because what's the worst thing you could do to a rookie? Rush him, get his head all messed up because he's in over his head, and then he winds up taking a few steps backwards. They don't want to do that. So I think Theo Johnson is going to be ramped up and brought into this offense a little bit slowly at the start. Heck, now watch against the Vikings, he catches 10 for 120 yards.
Well, I wonder if they're hiding him a little bit because he can catch the ball, but they just seem
Eric, first of all, not only he's got terrific hands, he's got flexibility and pliability. He's got yard after the catch potential.
Yeah.
Okay. And on top of that, from what I've seen in the summer, he's a pretty damn good route runner too.
Yeah.
Which Penn State did not really utilize him much as a pass receiver.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I think he can get down the seam
definitely
and beat linebackers with ease.
Look,
I think,
I'm going to tell you what. Again, you've listened to me for a long time.
Yeah.
What are 2 of my favorite pass plays that the Giants playbook seems to have dissolved over the years? The back shoulder throw.
Right.
Back shoulder throw, which is one of my favorite plays in the playbook. Yeah. And for years, it's been gone. The seam pass to the tight end.
Right.
That's the other one.
Yeah.
Phil Simms to Mark Bavaro.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
The tight end.
And Zeke Mowat, too. That's 2 of them.
Well, of course. No question.
Yeah.
And those 2 plays have miraculously now. Eli used to do that with Shockey some.
Yeah.
Right.
But those two plays have miraculously disappeared, and they're two of my favorite plays in the playbook.
Right. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought the Sims. That was his best pass in my book. Was the seam pass. So the last guy I wanted to bring up, that I think is really flying under the radar too, and part of it's because of injury. But I don't know what it is, but I just have a really good feeling is Drew Phillips. I think the coaching staff has big plans for him. I think the fact that they've already kind of pegged him as a starter in the slot says a lot about him. I know he's been hurt, so and he's healthy again now. But I think they think highly of him. But I wanted to hear what you think.
A very smart player, very, very eager to learn, hard worker, hustles, very physical, plays bigger than even his size. Okay, really likes physicality and contact. Not afraid to be aggressive and play downhill. Okay, there's a lot to like there, an awful lot to like there. But Eric, he is a rookie.
Right.
He is going to make rookie mistakes.
Okay.
And I hope, I say this all the time. I remember when Mark Haynes was a rookie, okay? And he used to get sizzled like a piece of bacon.
Yeah.
And what happened? He eventually became a multiple-time Pro Bowl player. Every rookie defensive back, almost everyone. Sauce Gardner was one of the few that did, right, with the Jets.
Right.
But virtually every rookie defensive back is going to have those handful or two handfuls of moments during the NFL season where they are caught with their pants down and it's, oh my, what the heck just happened?
Right.
It's going to happen. And when it does, you know how many people are going to jump on that kid's bones?
Right.
Wow.
Well, it's going to be tough for him right off the bat because he's got Justin Jefferson and Addison out there. So so
the Twitterverse will let him know about it.
Of course. So, not jumping away from players just for a second and back to the coaching staff, we have a change in defensive coordinator. Before I get to the actual change, I do have a question. One thing that Hard Knocks really did not touch was the separation of Martindale and the Giants. It was briefly mentioned, but not the specifics. There was no questions beyond it. Was it in the building last year? Was there palpable tension between Martindale and Daboll? Were they just not on the same page, if you can say?
Well, here's what I will also tell you, John, and this is part of me being a hybrid.
Sure.
There are certain things that I flat out can't say.
Right.
There are things I don't know, and I'll tell you I don't know. If there are things I can say, I will tell you I can't say. In this case, it's an I don't know. And why do I say that? Well, because within the scope of my job with Big Blue Kickoff, I'm in the locker room, I'm in the studio, I'm in the lunchroom, I'm by the PR office. I see the ticket salespeople. I'm not back in the coaches' offices.
Right.
So if there was friction, I'm not going to speak to something that I don't have firsthand knowledge about. I'm not back in the coaches' offices. Okay, I'm not. I'm not in the scouts' offices. I'm not in the personnel department's offices or the owner's offices. So did I ever physically see in my presence abrasiveness between those two? No, I never saw it. And that's it's a factual answer. Now, if I were back in those parts of the building and saw it, I would have to tell you that I can't say.
Right. I got you.
That's an honest answer there.
It certainly seemed odd the way it came down, but now you bring in Bowen, which is a much different mindset. Wink was more of you're on an island on the outside and we're coming after you. And who knows how many people I might send and where they might be coming from. And you're going to have to really kind of man up in a lot of places and take risks is kind of what it did. This is a different defense. Just general feeling right now where the defense is at. You got a lot of younger players. You got a lot of new folks. Burns coming over, ton of talent. Guy's going to be probably the best pass rushing linebacker we've had since maybe LT. I mean, he gives you that kind of.
Oh, don't go there.
I didn't
John,
say it's the same as LT. I said since LT. We haven't had.
I'm going to say this. I think Brian Burns is the best pure pass rusher the Giants have had since JPP.
Okay, fair enough.
That's how far I'm going to go. But don't ever put LT.
No,
fair enough. Fair enough. So these
let's
all
put it this
new.
way: the Giants aren't disappointed with that trade so far. I would assume
Not at all.
Not at all. Yeah.
So the gelling of the defense so far during the summer has it kind of, from your perspective, from being able to see a little bit of it, are they kind of coming along? The injuries in the secondary seem to have kind of held up some of the development in identifying who might be outside on the second cornerback spot, but just coming together in a new scheme. And what's your thoughts?
John, I love the front seven. I look at that, and the Brian Burns trade just changes the complexion of everything that you can do with your front seven. Because as you know, if you've got your 5 offensive linemen, and then if you wanted to keep in a tight end, and maybe if you wanted to even play with 2 tight ends, or if you wanted to use a back as a blocker or a chipper, the most you can really consider, unless you want to totally cripple your offense, like what the Giants did when Colt McCoy had to go up to Seattle and beat the Seahawks.
Right.
Well, they kept 7 guys in.
Right.
Okay. So now that's not practical, really, in most cases. So if you've got 6 guys, that the offense is going to keep in, because now they know that you've got 3 guys who are potentially worth a double team: Dexter Lawrence, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Brian Burns.
Right.
Well, guess what? That means Nacho is going up against nobody. He's going up against space. He's going to win every time. So, basically what you're telling your offensive coordinator by adding that 3rd member to the front line, who is a devastating double team threat, what you're now doing is you're forcing the offensive coordinator to pick where he's going to throw his double teams on every single play.
Right.
And that's like going to a crap game in Atlantic City. It really is. Who am I going to double on this? Am I going to double Dexter on this play? Am I going to double Dexter and Tibbs? Am I going to double Burns and Dexter? Am I going to double the 2 guys on the outside and let Dexter Lawrence eat my quarterback for lunch? What am I going to do?
Right.
By having those 3 ferocious double team threats on that front line, it changes the entire complexion of every single game the Giants will play. And then on top of that, behind them, the tackle machine, Bobby Okereke, Micah McFadden, who had over 100 tackles last year, but there were times where he missed tackles because he took a bad angle. Okay? But I think it's clear the arrow's up on him. I mean, he had a breakout season. Can he get better? Yes, he can get better. Should he get better? I think he will. I absolutely love Isaiah Simmons. You guys, if you follow me at all, when he came out that draft, I thought he was the best defensive player in that draft. I love Isaiah Simmons. And if you're Shane Bowen, even though you don't like to blitz, you've got the potential now not only to create a headache with your front 4, but now what if you decide that you're going to send a corner blitz, a safety blitz, or maybe Isaiah Simmons? Think about that now.
Right.
Yeah.
Think about that.
For sure. Yeah.
What the heck is an offensive coordinator going to do against that? Because even if he thinks he's got his 6 guys and he can somehow box up the Giants' front 4, now Isaiah Simmons comes on a blitz. Guess what? Your quarterback's a pancake.
Yeah.
Right.
It seems like Kayvon Thibodeau is had a real good summer too, right?
Yeah. Kayvon had a very, very productive offseason. He thinks of himself more as a power pass rusher. When he came out of college at Oregon, I thought his primary weapon was his quickness off the snap, which is something O.C. Mignora was. The quickest off the snap of any edge rusher in terms of defensive ends I'd ever seen. And I saw a lot of that in Kayvon Thibodeau. Well, he's changed his game now. In his 3rd year in the NFL, he thinks of himself now as more of a power rusher than he does a get-off quick guy. He talks about Brian Burns as a get-off quick guy and himself as a power rusher. So, that's going to – for me, for Thibodeau to take the next step, he's got to be consistent through the entire season.
Yeah.
Right.
The first 2 years, now his first year, he had a sprained MCL for the first half of the season. He
Right.
played with a brace, and he wasn't the same guy. Okay? We can write that off.
Right.
Last year, he faded the last month of the year.
Yeah.
He started running out of gas.
Right.
He needs to show me now, if he's going to take the next level, to next step, he needs to show me he can go through a full 17-game season and be fully consistent all the way to the end and not lose some gas. That's how Thibodeau's going to get better.
And John and I have talked about this a little bit on another show, but it seems to me that Brian Burns can get in his ear and say, "We need you," and that Brian Burns has got that kind of gravitas that he can come up to him and say, we need you at your best right now," and push him. So I think those two can push each other a little bit as well.
Well, when John, look at it this way, Eric, when's the last time the Giants had bookend linebackers of this ability?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Banks and Taylor, right?
Yeah, you're talking a long time. Yeah.
But we weren't supposed to do that. You said not to.
Yeah. Wait, you said no Taylor.
I didn't compare.
Yeah.
I didn't compare. I said
Okay.
since. Big difference. But and yeah, I think they make each other better. The presence of the guys in that front seven changes the entire complexion for the offensive coordinator every single week when the Giants are playing an opponent. That's how important Brian Burns was. Why do you think they made this trade, fellas? They gave up quite a bit and then had to sign him to an extension.
Right.
That's why they did it. That's why in Hard Knocks, when Joe Shane goes to Shane Bowen, and he goes, Brian Burns, like, what do you think? And Shane Bowen's like, yeah, okay, yep.
A lot I can do with that.
He knows. He knows. It changes everything.
The defense. It changed the
changes
defense.
Everything. Changes everything. And when you have a young and inexperienced secondary, I said this on Big Blue Kickoff the other day. What is the best way to enhance a young, experienced secondary? You got one way is you go and you sign a premier free agent, or you trade for a premier veteran who can come right in and immediately elevate that secondary. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is make sure that your front seven is scaring people, intimidating people, and causing them to throw off their game plan.
Yeah.
That's the other way to do it. And that's what the Giants are banking on. Look, you guys remember the 2000 Giants that won the NFC Championship?
Of course.
Sure.
Okay. Think about that secondary. Sean Williams, Sam Garnes, right, with the two safeties. Neither guy was very athletic, fleet of foot, or had great range.
Right.
Okay. Jason Sehorn was one corner.
Dave Thomas.
And he wasn't
Dave
the
Thomas.
same.
Yeah.
Dave Thomas was the other.
Right.
And Dave Thomas had straight on speed, but did not have great coverage skills.
Right.
No.
And Jason Sehorn was not the Jason Sehorn that he was before the injury. So what was that secondary like? That secondary was very limited. And by the way, Emmanuel McDaniel was the slot corner.
Yeah, he was.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Okay. Yeah. Now, at the beginning of the season, if I told you that's your starting secondary, is anybody shaking in their boots?
No.
Right.
No.
Right.
But what did the Giants do? No. The Giants made sure that their front, Robert Harris, Keith Hamilton, Michael Strahan, these guys, these guys were going to get after it.
Right.
And that's what happened.
We even talked about, I mean, you can go back, and again, not saying they're the same. I'm going to state that ahead of time. But you can go back to even 86 when at the end of the year, Herb Welch is starting at free safety. You still had Elvis Patterson playing a lot of snaps, and he was nicknamed Toast for a reason. I mean, it was the fact that we could get after the quarterback. We could take you just completely off your game.
That's it.
You're not going to have all pros at every position. And I think that's the thing is some fans get a little too wrapped up. Oh, we got to do this. I'm like, there's only so many all pro players you could possibly afford. It's team cohesiveness and ability to maximize one and overcome another.
Spider web. Pro football is a spider web. I talk about it all the time. It's a spider web because every strand connects to other strands.
Right.
And you have to peel back all the layers of the onion in every question that you ask about pro football because there are multiple layers to every single question and every single answer. I mean, And we just talked about that 2000 team. Michael Barrow and Jesse Armstead were two of the linebackers.
Yeah.
That front seven was responsible for saving that secondary's bacon.
Yeah.
Well,
we all kept waiting for Dave Thomas, the shoe to drop, and it never did because the front seven was so good. That was.
And Eric, that's what they're banking on this year. Yeah. They knew they couldn't get that guy in the secondary who was going to be so impactful. So what did they do? Yeah. They beefed up the front seven. I would be shocked if the Giants don't have a top 10 defense in the NFL by the end of the season.
Oh, that would be something. Yeah.
Return
if they can, because the defense, if they can even give me middle of the pack, would be an improvement. So
middle of the pack is 16.
Right. I know, but
I'm going 10.
I know you are. So I'll take that any day because I think Wink's reputation was greater than the results when he was here because statistically he had the turnovers in the second half of the year last year, and there were injury and talent issues his first year here. But that they gave up a lot of yards. So if you're telling me we're getting anywhere near 10, I'll be happy. If they get to 14, I'll be happy this year. So, well, Minnesota did that. Minnesota was bottom tier defense 3 years ago, and when the Giants 2 years ago when the Giants beat in the playoffs, and they brought in their new defensive coordinator and went up to 16. So they made that jump. So if we can make a jump like that, and if we get up to where you're talking about, I'll be thrilled.
Well, I think the best is yet to come for Dexter Lawrence and Thibodeau and Burns and Okereke. I think these guys are on the ascent. I think these guys have yet to play their best ball. I really believe that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I know we've had you for a while, so I'll wrap this up. So I'm going to ask you real quick your thoughts this year on two particular things. One, where do you see? Give me a range. I don't want to steal something that you might do on your own show, but where do you think the Giants are going to finish? Kind of give me a record wise, and then your thoughts on Jones. Does he make it through the season?
Right.
Does he make it through the season, and do we see a much improved 22? Because I mean, again, 22, he had one of his better years, but his supporting cast at receiver was nothing compared to what we have today.
Yeah.
Well, as we've talked about our Big Blue Kickoff ad infinitum. Nobody, well, outside of Slayton, really, outside of Slayton, and of course, Wan'Dale Robinson's been hurt, but who on that receiving core would make this receiving core this year?
Right, none.
Think about, Hodgins is on the practice squad.
On the practice squad,
right. Yeah.
And over the last 2 months of that season, he was like the lead guy.
Yeah. And yet Richie James, he's not making this team.
Well, Richie James caught 57 balls that season. He was the #1 target of the receivers. Him and Saquon Barkley tied for the team lead with 57 receptions. Right. Richie James is not making this team.
Right.
Yeah.
So, all right. I think it's a 9-8 team. Okay.
Yeah.
That's my record. My prediction. I always make it the week of the opening game. I said it the other day on BBK. I'll say it again on Big Blue Breakdown, and I'll say it to you guys here. I think the Giants are a 9-8 win team. Which 9 you win will determine whether or not you sneak in as a third wild card. We know the story. 9 puts you right on the cusp.
Right.
It can get you in if you win the right 9. If you don't win the right 9, you stay home. So my inclination right now is to say they won't win the right 9, and they'll wind up 9-8 and not making the playoffs.
Yeah.
That's how I feel right now about this club. Having said that 9-8 projection has them winning in the first 2 weeks. I've got them beating Minnesota, and I've got them beating Washington. 2 middleweights, and I love to compare boxing analogies, as you guys probably know. Those are not heavyweight teams. Right. Minnesota's not a heavyweight. Right. Washington's not a heavyweight. You have to beat fellow middleweight teams if you are going to be 500 or better. You have to beat fellow middleweight teams. You're not if you're not going to beat heavyweights, we'll understand that. But you got to beat the middleweights.
Right.
So the Giants need to win these first 2 games, in my opinion, to become the kind of hovering around 500 for most of the season. And I'll say they're going to be 9-8. That's my pick for the season. Daniel Jones. Look, the only thing I will say is that last year, more quarterbacks started an NFL game than any other year in NFL history. these guys get hurt as often as mosquitoes invade a picnic. That's just the way it is these days. Is the offense better? Are the offensive line better? Sure. I think we think it is. I wish they would play more snaps together in the preseason.
Right.
You guys probably know that too. My litmus test, I believe that if I'm the head coach of a team in the NFL today, and again, I stand on what I believe. You don't have to agree with me. I can always agree to disagree with you. But my deal is I want my starting players to play between 40 and 50 snaps total during the 3 preseason games.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I want, especially if it's the offensive line or the secondary, because those 2 units rely on gelling and weaving together fabric more than any other units on the entire field. So am I disappointed that the guys did not get those amounts of snaps? Yes, I am. I wish they would have. I think they'd be better for it. But there were injuries involved, so they couldn't make that happen. Okay, it is what it is. I think Daniel Jones, if he is able to stay healthy for the season, and again, that's just potluck, nobody knows. But I think Daniel Jones is going to have a dynamite year. I think the number we threw out the other day on BBK, I think I was in the neighborhood of like 26 touchdowns and maybe 9 or 10 interceptions. And he'll probably throw for like 3,800 yards. I think those were the numbers that I projected for him.
Okay. All right.
And I don't think that's unrealistic at all, especially because I think the Giants receiving core and the tight end core, if Theo Johnson starts getting worked in at some point, they're going to get a lot of yak yardage.
Right.
And you know what? Let me head this off at the pass now before some of you folks hit me up on Twitter. Okay? There's going to be a game where Daniel Jones throws for 320 yards, and there'll be 3 catches that were made by Wan'Dale Robinson, Darius Slayton, and maybe Malik Neighbors that wound up being 60-yard yaks.
Yaks, yeah.
And
but it counts.
5-yard passes and went for 60-yard yaks. And there's going to be people out there saying, well, you can't give Daniel Jones credit for that because it was all yak yardage. It was a 5-yard
pass. It all
pass.
counts the same. Well, it all counts. We actually brought this up in a previous show ourselves that we talked about this receiving, exactly what you're talking about, this receiving core with the yak. He could have a really monster year because of the yak yardage with these guys. So we're John and I are totally on board with what you're saying. We've talked about it.
Eric, trust me, Brian Dable is significantly looking at yak yardage out of this unit.
Yeah.
There's no question in my mind. He is counting on big time yak yardage.
Right.
I think you're gonna see some of that too out of Tracy, the rookie running back, who is very, very exciting with yak yardage. We saw it during the summer. This kid has hands, runs really good routes, has really good quickness, terrific in the open field.
Yeah. And so you know, John and I talked about this, and I don't care how the yards come. I don't care if it's a 5-yard pass that turns into an 80-yard touchdown. It all counts the same. So that's what the quarterback's job is anyways, to make the right read, hit the guy that makes the play. So you're not going to hear me criticizing that type of play. I want the touchdowns. So.
See, I thought you were going to go in a different direction, Paul. I thought we were going to get a similar, like there'll be 4 or 5 games in a row, plays really great games. And then that first quarter of game 6 or 7 or whatever, he throws an interception. The fandom goes crazy. He's horrible. Get him off the field. It's the Eli thing from 2007 after the Minnesota game where he gave up three pick 6 touchdowns, and people wanted him off the team at that point, and we go on to win the Super Bowl later that year. So people who don't like Jones they're going to only be quiet while he's doing well, but they will rear their heads up the second he does not do well.
We saw this a little bit with Phil Simms and Jeff Hostetler, though. I remember my first exposure to the internet was back during the debate with Hostetler and Simms, and those fans that didn't really care for Simms came out of the woodwork during that debate again. So there were those people that just never liked Phil Simms, and they had to lay low for a while because they couldn't criticize him because what the team was doing. But when Hostetler, after the '90 Super Bowl, and there was a debate who's going to start, those anti-Sims people came out like crazy. I remember that. So we've seen it a little bit before.
Well, heck, there was that one year where Kerry Collins had fumbleitis big time.
Yeah.
Right.
And it seemed like every time he got hit in the pocket, that ball was coming loose. And they basically said to him, okay, look, that's got to stop. And what happened? He cleaned it up and helped the Giants get to a Super Bowl.
Right.
And you and I and John were talking about this before we came on. There's this narrative out there that Daniel Jones is a turnover machine. That's not true anymore.
No.
That was early in his career, and that largely stopped. But even if it's not just the fans. You'll see pundits in the media still talk about that, and I'm like, what are you talking about? So that's not a fair criticism of him right now either.
No, you have a certain segment of fans and media who believe in tattoo parlors, you know, and once something happens, they got to tattoo it to some poor player's forehead or some coach's forehead, and they won't let it go. Right. They just can't. It's like they've got an affliction. They just can't let it go.
Yeah. So, well, we'll wrap it up, Paul.
Yeah, we should wrap this
up. We so appreciate you coming on and
to
talk.
You're on, you know.
Yeah. So
25-8, fellas. I
know, right? That's what my wife says that I've been trying to do. So once again, though, tomorrow night, once you just plug it again, I'm going to put it in the description, especially that live call-in, which sounds really awesome.
Yeah, I'm hoping that we get a lot of different callers who maybe are too shy to reach out during the Big Blue Kickoff live show on Giants.com. So 7:30 p.m. Eastern time, Wednesday night, live version of the Big Blue Breakdown on the New York Giants on SI.com YouTube page. And again, we'll be taking chats. If you want to type in your questions and comments, that's fine. But if you want to do a video call like this, you can do a video call. And again, if you're shy and bashful, you can always black out the camera, and that's fine. I'll still talk to you. It's perfectly okay. And we'll hopefully have a lot of fun with this. And I hope that a lot of folks maybe who have felt inhibited for one reason or another about reaching out to me and all these other different platforms, maybe this is a better way for you guys to interact.
Nice. Well, and I'll just throw in the caveat. It's no problem to disagree. Open communication is open communication, but open communication doesn't mean you get to just say anything. So disagreeing is disagreeing. Being nasty is being nasty. We can all agree on that. But Paul, again, thank you so much.
Thank you for so much time. Yeah.
And for those of you who've been watching and going to key this up, make sure you like, subscribe. I hate doing that, but that's the way these things work. So again, appreciate it. And we're going to call it a night. So thanks for watching, everybody, and have a great day.